Shalom Kulam, welcome everybody. This is the sixth chapter of the Laws of Torah Study, Hilchot Talmud Torah, Perek Vav. Kol Talmid Hachamim Mitzvah Lahadro. It's a positive commandment to be respectful towards any Torah sage. V'af al pi she'eno ribo, even if it's not one's specific teacher. Shene'emar, as the verse says, Mipnei seva takum v'hadarta pnei zaken. You shall arise before the gray-haired, and you shall pay respect to the elderly. The word zaken is interpreted to mean ze shekana chokhmah, one who has acquired wisdom. And at what point does one have to rise before a sage? Mi sheyikrav mimenu be'arba amot, ad she'avor mikeneged panav. Once he approaches within 4 amot, 4 cubits, until he passes him. En almedimi panav lo bebet merchatz. One may not stand for a sage in respect when he is in the bathroom. I'm sorry, when he's in a bathhouse, velo bebet kisei, nor in a bathroom. Shnei Emar, as the verse says, Takum v'hadarta, you shall rise and be respectful. Kima sheyesh ba hidur, in other words, rising up, which is an act of respect. Ve'en ba'alei umanut hayavin la'amod mipnei talmidei chachamim. And artisans are not required to stand up in front of a sage, b'sha'a she'oskim b'melachtan, when they're engaged in their work. Shnei Emar, as it says, Takum v'hadarta, rise up and pay respect. Ma hidur she'en bo chisron kis, af kima she'en ba chisron kis. Just as paying respect doesn't cause a financial loss, so too the rising up should not cause a financial loss. Uminayin shelo ya'atzim einav min hachacham. And how do we know that one should not close his eyes, shut his eyes, so he doesn't, from the sage, so that he doesn't see the sage there and therefore doesn't have to stand in front of him. Tilmod lomar, learn from this. You shall be in awe of your God. Ha kol davar shehu masul alev. Here you learn that every matter which is dependent upon one's heart, in other words, it's not something visible to others. Ne'emar bo v'yareta me'elohecha. It says about it, you shall be in awe of your God. And he provides several different links there that are the different psukim that say the same thing. Ein ra'ui l'chacham she'etrich al ha'am. It's not proper for a sage to bother the public. V'yichaven atzmo lehen kedei she'ya'amdu mipanav, and intentionally present himself in order to stand in front of them, so that they should stand in front of him rather. Ela yelech b'derech tzara umitkaven shelo yir'eh oto ehad. Rather, he should go through some kind of a shortcut so that the people not see him. Kedei shelo yitrichu la'amod, so that they are not bothered to stand up. V'hachamim hayu mekifin, and the early sages would go in a roundabout way. V'olchin b'derech hachitzona she'en makirihen mitzuyin sham. They'd go in a roundabout way where the people who knew them were not to be found. Kedei shelo yitrichu, in order that they not be bothered. Rochev harehu keme'alech. One who is riding on a horse, for example, is as if he's walking. And just as one has to stand for a sage who's walking, one has to likewise stand for one who is riding. 3 people who are walking together on the road. Harav be'entza, the teacher should be in the middle. Gadol miyamino v'katan mismolo, the student who's greater in wisdom on his right, and the one who is less in wisdom on his left. הרואה חכם אינו עומד מלפניו עד שיגיע לו לארבע אמות. One who sees a sage should not stand before him until he reaches the 4 cubit distance. וכיוון שעבר ישב, and once he passes, he may sit. ראה אב בית דין, if he saw the head of the court, עומד מלפניו, משר יראינו מרחוק מלוא עיניו. He should stand once he sees him as far as his eyes can see, not just the 4 amot. ואינו יושב, and he may not sit, עד שיעבור מאחוריו 4 אמות, until he passes 4 cubits behind him. ראה את הנשיא, if he sees the exilarch or the head of the government, עומד מלפניו מלוא עיניו, he has to stand once he sees him as far as his eyes can see. ואינו יושב עד שישב במקומו, and he may not sit until he sits in his spot. או עד שיתכסה מעיניו, or until he's concealed from his vision. ונשיא שמחל על כבודו, כבודו מחול. But if the nasi pardons his honor is pardoned. Kishenasi nichnas, when the nasi enters a room or a congregation where people are, kola amomdim, all the people must stand up. Ve'ein yoshvin ad sheyomar lehem shvu, and they may not sit until he says sit. Kashe'av beit din nichnas, when the head of the court enters, osim lo shtei shurot omedim mikan umikan, they separate into 2 lines on either side of him, so he can pass through them. Ad shenichnas v'yashav bimkomo, until he enters and sits in his place. Usha'ara'am yoshvin bimkoman, but the rest of the people who aren't in the path where he's walking sit in their place. Chacham shenichnas, any other sage who comes in, kol sheyagia lo b'arba'a amot omed milfanav, anybody who he is within 4 cubits of, must stand. Had omed v'had yoshev. One stands up, and as soon as he passes, they sit down. Ad shenichnas v'yashav bimkomo, until he gets in and sits in his place. B'nei hachamim v'talmidei hachamim, the children of the sages and the students of the sages. Bizman sheharabim tzichin lehen, when the people need them, מקפצים על ראשי ראשי העם ונכנסים למקומן. They may jump over on the heads of the people. Literally, they can step over people until they get to their place. ואין שבח לתלמיד חכמים שייכנס באחרונה. And it's not praiseworthy of a talmid chachamim that he should enter last. יצא לצורך חוזר למקומו. If he had to leave, he may go back to his place. Bnei Chachamim, the children of the sages, b'zman sheyesh behen da'at lishmoa, if they have enough knowledge to understand what's being said, hofchin pnehem klape avihen, then they turn their face towards their father. En behen da'at lishmoa, hofchin pnehem klape ha'am, if they're unable to understand, then they turn towards the rest of the public. Talmid shehu yoshev lifnei ribo tamid, a student who's always in front of his Rav, eno rashai la'amod milfanav ela shachrit va'arvit bilvad. He's only allowed to stand in respect for his Rav twice a day, in the morning and in the evening. Why? Shelo yeheh kvodo merubeh mikavod shamayim, so that the honor given to his Rav is not greater than the honor given to God. Because we pray 3 times a day, he should only stand 2 times a day for his Rav. Mish hu zaken muflag b'zikna, an elder who's extremely old, af al pi she'eno hacham, even though he's not a sage, omdin lefanav, we must stand before him, ve'afilu hacham shehu yeled, and even a sage who's a child, omed bifnei hazaken muflag b'zikna, he must stand before such an elder person. On the other hand, he, as such a young sage does not have to stand completely up, ela kedei lehadro, rather just to show respect. Ve'afilo zeken goy, even a Gentile elderly person, mehadrin oto b'dvarim v'notnin lo yad l'samcho. We say respectful words to him and give him a hand to support him. Shene'emar, as the verse says, mi penei seva takum. In front of the white-haired, you should get up. Kol seva b'mashma. In other words, any elderly person is, and any gray-haired person, literally, is included in this. Talmidei Chachamim, the students of the sages, אינן יוצאים לעשות בעצמן עם כל הקהל בבניין ובחפירה של המדינה וכיוצא בהן. They don't have to go out to perform, they don't have to go with themselves, with the rest of the public, in order to do the building and digging and all those sorts of things that the city requires. כדי שלא יתבזו בפני עמי הארץ, so that they're not despised by rendered despicable by the people. ואין גובין מהן לבניין החומות ותיקון השערים ושכר השומרים וכיוצא בהן ולא לצורת המלך. Nor do we extract from them funds in order to build the city walls, or to fix the gates, or to pay for the guards, or anything like that, and nor even for gifts that are given to the king. ואין מחייבים אותן לתת המס, nor do we require them to pay taxes, בין משהו קצוב על בני העיר, בין משהו קצוב על כל איש ואיש, neither a general tax nor a head tax. שנאמר, as it says, גם כי ייתנו בגויים, עתה אקבצם, ויחלו מעט ממסע מלך ושרים. Even though they gave amongst the Gentiles, now I will gather them in, and soon they will not have to give to the king and the ministers. Likewise, if there was a business deal that was going on with a Talmid Chachamim, we permit him to do his business first. And we don't allow anybody else in the market to do that, to sell their goods ad shimkorhu, until he himself is able to sell. Likewise, if he had some kind of a judgment in court, and there were a lot of other litigants bringing their cases to court, we bring his case forward first and allow him to sit in front of the court. It's a great sin to disrespect the sages, or to hate them. Jerusalem was only destroyed because they disrespected the sages. שנאמר ביו מלעיבין במלאכי האלוהים ובוזין דבריו ומתעתעים בנביאיו. As the verse says, they were insulting what's the word I'm looking for? The emissaries of God, and despising his words and joking about the prophets. Klomar bozim melamdei devarav. That is to say, they were disrespecting the ones who teach his words. V'chein zeh she'amra Torah, and likewise that which the Torah says, im bechukotai tima'asu. If you shall be disgusted by my laws. This refers to melamdei hukotai tima'asu, that you are disgusted by the ones who teach my laws. And anybody who is disrespectful to the sages, he has no place in the world to come. And he's considered among those for for he despised God's word. אף על פי שמבזה את החכמים, אין לו חלק לעולם הבא. Even though a person who has disrespected the sages has no place in the world to come. אם באו עדים שביזהו, if there are two witnesses that he disrespected the sage. אפילו בדברים, even if he only did it with words, חייב נידוי, he has to be banned. ומנדין אותו בית דין ברבים, and the beit din bans him in public. וקונסין אותו ליטרה זהב בכל מקום, and he's fined a litra, which is, I guess, like a pound of gold in every place. ונותנין אותה לחכם, and he has to give that over to the sage that he's insulted. ומבזה את החכם בדברים, and one who insults the sage by words, אפילו לאחר מיתה, even after the sage is dead, מנדין אותו בית דין, the court bans him, והם מתירים אותו כשיחזור בתשובה, and they free him from the ban once he returns בתשובה, when he repents. אבל אם היה חכם חי, but if the sage was alive still, אין מתירים לו, the court may not remove his ban, עד שירצה זה שנידוהו בשבילו, until he appeases the sage for whom they banned him. וכן, likewise, החכם עצמו, the sage himself, מנדה לכבודו לעם הארץ שהפקיר בו. He may ban for his own honor any of the common people who behaved badly towards him. ואינו צריך לא עדים ולא התראה, and he requires neither witnesses nor warning. ואין מתירין לו עד שירצה את החכם, and his ban isn't lifted until he appeases the sage. ואם מת החכם, and if the sage died, באים שלושה ומתירין לו, then three may come and release him from his ban. ואם רצה החכם למחול לו ולא נידהו, הרשות בידו. But if the sage wanted to pardon his honor and not to ban him, he has that permission to do that. Harav שנידה לכבודו, the Rav who banned somebody for his honor, חייבים כל תלמידיו לנהוג נידוי במנודה. All of his students have to also behave towards that person with the ban. אבל תלמיד שנידק לכבוד עצמו, but a student of the Rav who enacted a ban on somebody for his honor, אין הרב חייב לנהוג בו נידוי. His master, his Rav, does not have to behave towards the banned person as if he were banned. אבל כל העם חייבים לנהוג בו נידוי. But all the rest of the public do have to behave towards him as if he's banned. וכן מנודה לנשיא. Likewise, someone who's banned towards the nasi, מנודה לכל ישראל. He's also banned with respect to all the rest of the Jewish population. מנודה לכל ישראל, if he's banned to all the Jews in general, אינו מנודה לנשיא. He's not banned with respect to the president. מנודה לעירו, if he's banned with respect to his own city, then מנודה לעיר אחרת, then he's also banned with respect to every other city. מנודה לעיר אחרת, if he's banned with respect to a city he doesn't live in, אינו מנודה לעירו. He's not banned with respect to his own city. Now, what case is being considered במי דברים אמורים? במי שנידוהו מפני שביזה תלמידי חכמים. We're only talking in these cases about someone who was banned because he insulted the sages. אבל מי שנידוהו על שאר דברים שחייבים עליהם נידוי. But if he was banned for any of the other reasons that a person may be banned, אפילו נידהו קטן שבישראל, even if the least of the Jews banned him, חייב הנשיא וכל ישראל לנהוג בו נידוי. Then even the Nasi and every other Jew is required to behave towards him as if he's banned. עד שיחזור בתשובה מדבר שנידו בשבילו, ויתירו לו. Until such time as until he repents and they release him from his ban. So, על 24 דברים מנדים את האדם בין איש, בין אישה. There's 24 things for which a person, whether man or woman, can be banned. Ve'elohen, and these are the 24. The one we already been discussing, hamivazet chacham, one who insults sages, ve'afilu lahar moto, even after he's dead. Hamivazeh shliach beidin, someone who insults the emissary of the court. Hakore lahavero eved, somebody who calls a fellow Jew a slave. Hamezalzel b'dvar echad midivrei sofrim, ve'in tzarich lomar b'divrei Torah, one who disrespects even one of who disrespects any of the rabbinic laws, and needless to say, if he disrespects any of the Torah laws, mi shalhu lo beit din v'kav'u lo zman v'lo ba, anybody that the court sent him a message and established a time for him to come, and he didn't come to the court. מי שלא קיבל עליו את הדין, מנדין אותו עד שייתן, one who did not accept the judgment of the court, he is banned until he does accept. מי שיש ברשותו דבר המזיק, כגון כלב רע או סולם רעוע, מנדין אותו עד שיסיר הזקו, somebody who has in his possession a dangerous object, for example, a bad dog or a rickety ladder, he's banned until he removes it from his possession. המוכר קרקע שלא לגוי, מנדין אותו עד שיקבל עליו כל אונס שיבוא מן הגוי לישראל חברו בעל המסר. Someone who sells his land to a Gentile is banned until he accepts upon himself any damage which the Gentile causes to his Jewish neighbor from the property. המעיד על ישראל בערכאות של הגויים והוציא ממנו בעדותו ממון שלא כדין ישראל מנדין אותו עד שישלם. Someone who testifies in a Gentile court against a Jew and extracted from him with his testimony, extracted from him money, not in accordance with Jewish law, he's banned until he pays the amount. Tabach kohen she'eno mafrish hamatanot v'notnan lekohen acher menadin oto ad shiten. A butcher who is a kohen, who doesn't separate out the gifts which are given to the kohen, and doesn't give them to a different kohen. In other words, he can't give them to himself. He's required to give them to a different kohen, and he doesn't do it. In such a case, he's banned until he does give them. המחלל יום טוב שני של הגלויות אף על פי שהוא מנהג, one who desecrates the second day of Yom Tov, of the exile, even though it's just a minhag, it's not a law, it's a custom. העושה מלאכה בערב הפסח אחר מחצות, somebody who performs melacha, which is a forbidden labor, on the afternoon before Pesach. המזכיר שם שמיים לבטלה, או לשבועה בדברי הווי, somebody who mentions God's name in vain, or for a vain vow. המביא את הרבים לידי חילול השם, somebody who brings a lot of people to desecrate God's name. המביא את הרבים לידי אכילת קודשים בחוץ, somebody who causes many people to eat sanctified meat in outside of the temple precinct. המחשב שנים וקובע חודשים בחוץ לארץ, somebody who establishes the calendar, in other words, years and months, outside the land of Israel, because the calendar can only be established in Israel. Ha-machshil et ha'ir, somebody who causes the blind to stumble, and this refers not necessarily to people who are specifically blind, but to anybody who, so to speak, can't see the proper way. Ha-ma'akev et rabim mila'asot mitzvah, somebody who prevents the majority people from performing a mitzvah. Tabach sheyatza trefa mitachat yedo, a butcher who sold trefa, in other words, non-kosher meat. Tabach shelo badak sakino lifnei chacham, a butcher who did not have his knife properly checked by a sage. Hamakshe atzmo ladat, one who brings himself to erection on his own. Mi shegerash et ishto ve'asa beno uveina shutafut o masau matan hamivi'in lahen lizakek ze leze ksheyavo shnehen lebeit din min adinotan. A person who divorced his wife, and they made a partnership between them, or a business deal, which brings them to require to need each other, and to bring contact with each other. When they come in front of the Beit Din, they are banned. Chacham sheshmu'ato ra'ah, a sage who has a bad reputation. And finally, hamenadeh mi she'eno hayav nidui, someone who bans a person who is not required to be banned. And that is the end of the 6th chapter. And we will have the 7th chapter next week, Be'ezrat Hashem.